question became, is if you wanted to be more than a tourist, if you just wanted to do more than take a picture and say, I got the t-shirt, how would you work there? It takes a really long extension cord to get power to the moon. The thought was developed by a group called the Jamestown Foundation. Let's take a crater and pave it over with solar cells. The difficulty is, if you're going to transport everything you need to build a construction site from the Earth there, getting material out of the gravity well here is phenomenally expensive. So expensive that even Donald Trump couldn't think of it. This is probably going to bankrupt all of the economies of the Earth if you thought about trying to take up every solar cell that you want. So the idea became, is there some way for us to go there, to use what we see on that part of the world, and find a way to take in situ materials and produce solar cells? This was Ed's initial request. Working at Rocketdyne, Ed developed a technique or two that worked really well for the moon, and one that worked really well for Mars that I'll come to later, called the Mars Jet. And people patted Ed on the head and said, thank you very much. If we ever make it back to the moon, you'll be one of the first people we call. And Ed said, wait. 11 years worth of research, you can't just set this on the shelf. You've got to use this. And I said, but how am I going to the moon? And he said, well, look at what you've got there. A lot of that stuff in the moon, the soil, if you look closely at it, you feel it, you touch it, the moon is made of these elements, these components. And if you look very closely at his method of stripping those apart, you're able to find out it's almost chemically identical to coal fly ash. So Ed's technique of developing a robot about the size of an RV that you plant in a crater of the moon, that would go through, scoop up 25 pounds worth of lunar regolith, heat it, compress it, put it into hydrogen fluoridized bed process, then have it produce ingots of aluminum, silica, magnesium, titanium. It turns out the coal fly ash that we regard as a problem has these same elements. And as you may recall, the United States doesn't have a domestic source of titanium, or we thought we didn't. It's in the coal that we burn. We have billions of tons of coal fly ash. There have been a number of people who have proposed through the years what to do with the coal fly ash. At least 35 years ago, someone in West Virginia put a brick into my hand that had been made from compressed coal fly ash. The difficulty was that project was always like fusion, just 10 or 15 years away. It's going to happen any minute now, we're pretty sure. It's a simple idea. Well, Atlanta built 8 boat rehab centers 3 years ago involving coal fly ash brick. The state of West Virginia just opened up a $100 million facility to make coal fly ash. There are studies from India that were financed, and plants financed by the World Bank that opened in India over the last 3 years to make coal fly ash into bricks. The difficulty in each of these, the boat rehab centers that were built in a ring around Atlanta, 6 of the 8 were shut within 2 years of opening because they had structural flaws. Part of the difficulty with coal fly ash bricks is the same difficulty we have when coal fly ash is laying on the ground. Coal fly ash bricks have heavy metals in them. And those heavy metals tend to leach out. They combine with air, they combine with water, and when they leach out, they leave a micro fissure, and that micro fissure attracts more moisture, attracts more oxidization, attracts more elements that lead to the cracking to the point that 6 out of 8 facilities built in Atlanta blew up or collapsed in some fashion, became structurally unsound to use within 2 years of their creation. Happily, if you look at this collection of materials, we want these things. We need these metals. And Ed McCullough's technique of extracting these metals turns out to be cheap. How cheap? Dirt cheap. Coal fly ash cheap. You may recall there was the Kingston fossil plant coal fly ash slurry spill occurred approximately 4.5 months ago. It was repeatedly in the blogs and many of the websites that are put together by Huffington Post, by treehuggers.com, a number of these you can see on your own. They speak of this as the greatest natural disaster, the greatest man-made disaster, one of the greatest nuclear disasters. It turns out there's a lot of radiation there. It turns out it was a thing that was much bigger than the Exxon Valdez spill. It turns out there were a number of other people who have been waiting in the wings to jump on the attack bandwagon about coal fly ash. This particular golf course in Virginia has been attacked because the hills and the contours were filled in by coal fly ash. Today, 75% of the coal fly ash produced is put into a waste dump somewhere. It's sometimes a landfill, it's sometimes a dump by the side of the road. Every now and then they try to put it into some nice scenery, but the difficulty is the heavy metals, the radioactivity, the thorium, the uranium, the titanium, several other parts of it make people unhappy. They feel it contaminates the water, the air. So the people on the moon haven't complained about it much because they're not organized yet. There are now, presently, 15 states that have proposals for new coal-burning power plants. These 15 states, it is estimated, for just the new power plants plant will add 80 million tons a year of coal fly ash. And there are people organizing against these from one end of this country to the other. My personal view, I've seen fanatics on the left, I've seen fanatics on the right. I think fanaticism causes a lot of confusion and it stops people from thinking. I don't want to get reduced to sloganeering. I'm not one of the guys who says it's Pollyanna, everything's going to work out well. I'm not one of the guys who says we can ignore what we're doing to the earth. But it does seem to me as though 80 million tons a year of coal fly ash is a dramatic change from what we've got going right now. We don't know how to handle what we got right now. Witness the Kingston slurry disaster. A number of powerful lobbying groups are beginning to put attack ads together that work on things that relate to headlines that can only be described as, I think, counterproductive. Coal fly ash more radioactive than nuclear waste. There's actually a website that talks about us turning our beloved Virginia and Southwest Virginia coal fields into the modern Hiroshima. We just don't have the blast, we have the after effect of radiation. Well, in point of fact, the radiation amount involved is far less than you get from wearing a radium-faced watch or dial. But it offers an attack point. A number of people in the World Bank attack mode are saying these heavy metals are causing the problems that we've got. In many parts of the world, from Indonesia to Brazil, people are drying up funding. Coal-fired power plants are under attack. And the simple fact is 85% of the electricity produced in the world today comes from coal. It's not possible, whatever you think or want or believe, it's not possible in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years. It's not possible to eliminate coal-burning power plants from the face of the earth. We would all very much like to have it happen, but the inertia of what we have now, if we want to be able to cut on the coffee maker in the morning, it's going to involve some component of coal-fired power plants. If you've got coal-fired power plants, you have two problems coming out of it. One is the coal fly ash. Right now, people are trying to use it for concrete, for bricks, for landfill, for asphalt mix-in. There are other problems relating to it, but the world's expert on this subject